We got 7 stories from 7 different outlets, guys. It's time for another episode of Regan's Newsround. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Reganelite here with another episode of Regan's Newsround. And we start with The Guardian with the headline that tech firms must allow vetting of AI tools as Musk warns all human jobs are threatened. There will come a point where no job is needed, says Elon Musk, who predicts AI will be able to do everything. And my first thought is, if nobody has any jobs, how are people going to pay for their bills? I don't know, maybe something like, universal basic income? Maybe something like that might be the food for thought, perhaps, yeah, because people need to be able to live and be able to have a life of some sorts. If AIs are going to be doing everything for us, because that is the road that we are potentially going down, that is a discussion that we need to generally have, don't we? So people need to be able, if people aren't going to be able to work because there are artificial intelligence is going to be doing the jobs for us, what about us? How do we make income? So I think that's a question that needs to be asked, doesn't it? The most advanced technology companies will allow the government to vet their artificial intelligence tools for the first time, Rishi Sunak has announced, as Elon Musk warns the technology could eventually replace all human jobs. Companies including Meta, Google, DeepMind and OpenAI have agreed to allow regulators to test their latest AI products before releasing them to the public. In a move that officials say they will slow the race to develop systems that can compete with humans. Sunak made the announcement on Thursday after a 2-day summit at Bletchley Park, in which a diverse group, which includes the world's richest man, the Vice President of the United States, and a senior Chinese government official, agreed that AI poses a grave risk to humanity. Speaking to the reporters at the end of the summit, Sunak said, "I believe the achievement of this summit will tip the balance in favour of humanity." Yeah, I'm sure Skynet will believe that. Yeah, you guys know that reference, don't you? The Prime Minister also announced the international support for an expert body inspired by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to be chaired by one of the godfathers of modern AI. The moves were welcomed afterwards by the technology billionaire Elon Musk in a conversation between the pair in central London, during which Musk described what he sees as a dramatic difference in the future for humanity. God, that's so weird seeing those two there. Look at that picture. I just feel like they're just like, I'm just playing along Elon Musk. He's just playing along with it all, really. We are seeing the most disruptive force in history here, he said. There will come a point where no job is needed. You can have a job if you want a job, but the AI will be able to do everything. Okay, well, if you want a job. Musk said he thought the summit had achieved a meaningful shift in the development of advanced AI. Simply having an insight and being able to highlight concerns of the public would be very powerful, he said. Speaking at the close of the summit, Sunak said agreements reached with multiple countries and AI companies that had significantly reduced the threat posed by the technology. However, he was forced to defend the voluntary nature of the testing agreement, with his government declining to introduce legislation to rein in AI development. Explaining that the UK has had to move faster than the legislative timetable would allow, he said technology is developing at such a pace that governments have to make sure that we can keep up. Considering this guy's track record, I don't think he's very trustworthy, if I'm honest, guys. I'm sure he will want some incentives of his own, to make money off this somehow. He said that ultimately binding requirements would probably be a necessity for AI firms. Under the agreement announced by Bletchley Park, the like-minded governments and AI companies agreed to work together on testing the safety of new AI models before and after they are released. Large language models, which underpin tools like ChatGPT chatbot, will be tested in collaboration with the governments against a range of dangers, including national security, safety, and social harms. The move follows the assurance of an executive order by the White House this week, requiring major tech firms to submit test results before their modules to the US government before they go public. Sunak said the testing would be led by new AI safety institutions and the US and UK, with the British body positioning itself as a global hub for the multilateral initiative, which does not include the participation of China. Global hub. You just say global. Like, no, you're not going to be the global force in this, Sunak. We're not. Just stop making that term. It's not. We're not going to be the face of our artificial intelligence. Like, just don't. The testing agreement is backed by the EU and 10 countries, including the US, the UK, Japan, France, and Germany. The leading AI companies that have agreed to testing, including Google, OpenAI, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta. Sunak said the US Secretary General Antonio Guterres has helped to secure international community backing from an expert panel to publish the state of AI science, it was reported. The idea is inspired by the way the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was set up to reach international science consensus, Sunak says. With the support of the UN's General Secretary General, every country has committed to nominate experts. Yoshua Bengio, known as one of the godfathers of modern AI, will chair the production of the first safety report. Bergo, the winner of the ACM Turing Award, the computer science equivalent of the Nobel Prize, has been a prominent voice of caution in the debate over AI development. He has led signatories in the letter published in March calling for a 6-month hiatus in giant AI experiments, and he backed a statement in May warning that the risk of extinction from AI should be treated with the same priorities as mitigating the social risk from pandemics and nuclear wars. I do think, we do need to take that. It does sound stupid now, but it can happen. It does sound stupid. It does, that AI take over the world and that. Like, we joke and laugh about it, but there is a serious point to it, and especially if you put AI in the hands of such dangerous weapons, or nuclear weapons of sorts. You have to put that into perspective, and it's really important that we do. Speaking to reporters earlier on Thursday, Sunak raised the nuclear and pandemic comparison. People developing this technology themselves have raised the risk that AI may pose, and it is important not to be alarmist about this, he said. There's debate about this topic. People in the industry themselves don't agree, and we can't be certain. But there is a case to believe that they may pose a risk on the scale like pandemics and nuclear war, and that is why, as leaders, we have a responsibility to act, to take steps to protect people, and that's exactly what we're doing. Concerns around AI, the term for computer systems that can perform tasks typically associated with intelligent beings, range from the threat of mass-produced disinformation in elections to advanced systems evading control and threatening humanity. The Prime Minister announces that they were the culmination of a second day of intense diplomatic activity at the International AI Safety Summit. British officials were delighted to be able to issue a communique at the summit, at the beginning of the summit, signed by 28 governments, including the UK, the EU, the US, and China. The Bleachley Declaration promised that the signatories would work together on shared safety standards in the process, officials likened to the COP summit on the climate crisis. Sunak's attempts to position the UK as a world leader in developing new AI rules were partly overshadowed on Wednesday by the announcement that the US Commons Secretary Ginga Ranamigo of new AI safety institutes in Washington. British officials said they expect to work closely with the new US institute and others to create networks of similar organisations that could do testing from around the world, with multilateral testing agreements forming a framework for that collaboration. Speaking at a press conference at the close of the summit, Sunak said that he recognised concerns about the potential for AI to eliminate jobs, but workers should view the technology as a co-pilot. I know this is anxiety that people have, he said. We should look at AI much more as a co-pilot than something that necessarily is going to replace someone's job. AI is a tool that can help almost everybody to do their job faster, better, quicker, and how we are already seeing it being deployed. It's a lot to take in, that is for sure, guys. I think ultimately this summit is a good thing. It's good that they've had this discussion, that they've had people in to talk about it. That there are some agreements. Obviously, I'm concerned about the power that artificial intelligence has, and I think it is something that we need to be greatly concerned about. I didn't hear a lot of worry reading that, and it just feels like we're just going to truck along and just see how it goes, sort of thing. I don't think there's been enough remedy on the threat that artificial intelligence poses. And I think that really needs to be taken into account when we're talking about artificial intelligence, but it's good that Britain are looking to invest in it. I wouldn't say it's going to be a global thing. That's just for the UK. No. I think he's exaggerating a bit, the Prime Minister, if I'm honest. The US will definitely have a hand in it. Taiwan, for their Taiwan and their chips factory. I don't know if they would have a hand in it, actually. I'll probably take no Taiwan. I'm thinking of something else, guys. But China will will have their own initiatives, as I'm sure one or two other nations will too. I'm not sure how where Russia stands in terms of technological advancement, but they may have some, but they're probably a bit quiet about it, guys. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about artificial intelligence and that. Interesting to say the least, guys. So we're going to switch gears a little bit from The Guardian to Sky News, guys, and an interesting poll. This from Sky News. So the public feel politicians invest or exaggerate culture wars as a tactic, a poll suggests. Again, when we talk about polls, we have to say that this is one poll. Take it with a pinch of salt, as I say with all these things. Professor Dobby Duffer, director of the Policy Institute at King's College London, says evidence suggests using culture war may not be a particularly successful approach to an election. Considering where the Conservative Party kind of stand right now with what their policies at that, yeah, I don't think culture war is really the priority of the British people. I don't know, maybe something to do with, I don't know, a cost of living crisis. Maybe we have an institutional racist police force. That might be an issue as well to some people. Perhaps maybe we have a poor education system, crumbling schools with RAAC concrete. We have hospitals that have the same issue as well. Yeah, there's quite a lot of issues in the country, and I think culture war is not the priority. But it looks like that's what the Conservatives potentially may be going down as a means to try and win over voters. So, more than half of people feel politicians are using so-called culture wars to distract from other issues, according to a survey which found the term woke is increasingly seen as an insult. Almost two-thirds, 62% of those polled said politicians invent or exaggerate culture wars as a political tactic, up from less than half, 44%, 3 years ago. Just 1 in 10 people felt politicians who talk about divisions over cultural issues generally believe it is an important topic, with 56% feeling they are just trying to distract people from other important topics. If this poll is led to be true by the vast majority, it shows that the British public are not stupid. But I can just see someone pointing in the comments right now saying, well, you voted for Brexit. I'm not even going to go there. The research by the King's College London and Ipsos UK found that ahead of a general election, the top issue said people would be determining their vote would include the cost of living, inflation, and the NHS and social care. The third was the issue of channel crossings. But transgender rights and free speech were at the bottom of the list, with just 1% saying that these issues would determine their vote. Yeah. The economy, inflation, cost of living, the National Healthcare Service, social care, these are things that people want to know. What are the Conservatives going to do to improve them? What is a Labour Party, if I want to vote for them, going to do for them? Which is why the manifestos are going to be extremely important when the general election finally comes around. So definitely in agreement with that. The research found a growing sense that culture wars are now a serious problem from society to politics, with a majority, 52%, now holding up this view, up from 43% in 2020. Professor Bobby Duffer, director of the Policy Institute at the KLC, said the speed and scale of the UK's adoption of culture war issues and rhetoric in our media and politics has been one of the key trends of the last few years. And it has gone with the hand in hand with big shift in public awareness and opinion. But opinion is also swinging against the use of these identity divisions, with one of the biggest shifts being the increase in the public's perception that politicians are inventing or exaggerating culture wars as a political tactic. The evidence suggests that it may not be a particularly successful approach to an election, as tiny minorities pick out culture wars related issues as important as to how they vote. When it comes to terminology, there is a greater awareness now of a number of terms, including woke, cancel culture, or culture wars since 2020, although around 40% did not know what either the term woke or anti-woke meant. The term woke, defined as being aware of social problems such as racism and inequality, is now seen by a greater number of people as an insult, the survey suggested. But 42% of the public said they would consider it insulting to be described as woke, up from 24% in 2020, just as over a quarter branding it as a complaint. Don't know why I didn't get that. Men were twice as likely as women to say they are anti-woke, while around 4 in 10 Conservative Leave voters consider themselves to be so, as did 3 in 10 men aged 60 and above. Gillian Skinner, head of political research at Ipsos UK, is saying, while negative associations of woke are rising, most people do not consider themselves to be either woke or anti-woke. Ipsos interviewed a representative sample of 3,716 people aged 16 and above online across the UK in August. So this was around 3,716 people that this poll was done in, guys. So what do I think of the poll? I think it's just one poll, but if we're to say, yeah, that's what the general perspective in the UK is, I would say that's probably true. People, though, the vast majority of people are more concerned about putting food on their plate, being able to pay their bills, being able to put on their heating, just being able to live their lives and have a life, and not actually struggling to make it to every single day just to be able to put food on their table for their children. They want to be able to get healthcare and not actually pay, and not the threat of having to pay for it and going private. They want a national healthcare service that is there for them. They want to have an education system. They want to have their children to have an education system that's there for them. They want to be able to earn money, have money, and be able to spend that money however they want. And lots of people and lots of savings have had their bit eaten up because of the damage that the Conservatives have caused. And they will finger point and say war in Ukraine, coronavirus, and of course Brexit has also had an impact on these things too. There has also been the political party of the Conservatives have been in charge for 13 years. And the vast majority of people from a lot of polls have suggested that people are kind of just fed up and they just want something different. And I think and I'm in agreement. People want something different, and I understand that many people, like myself, are sceptical and questionable about the Labour Party. But it's been 13 years since they've been in power. 13 years is a long time, and of course there will be rightful criticism of them. But considering how things have been handled over the last 13 years, I think we do need a change, in my opinion. Guys, while you're here, if you hit that like button, that'd be greatly appreciated. And if you can share this across your social media platforms, it would also be helping. And if you hit the bell notification icon, guys, when you subscribe, which I really would like you to subscribe because it really does help, you'll be notified of when I go live. So, guys, the next one here is, unfortunately, I do have to cover a little bit about it, but it's not so much about the conflict, it's more about the British nationals involved, guys. So this is from the BBC. The headline is nearly 100 British nationals listed as eligible to leave Gaza via Egypt. So nearly 100 British citizens have been listed as being allowed to leave Gaza and enter Egypt on Friday. This is good. Obviously, on the wider perspective, obviously, we just want, my position is, in case people ask, just want the bloodshed to stop. I want a ceasefire, and I want humanitarian aid to get in to help those innocent people, not just British citizens, all those who are in Gaza. But we're talking specifically about British citizens on this topic, guys. The Palestinian Border Authority's list includes 127 names in its UK section of approved foreign nationals, 92 of whom are described as British citizens. The remaining 35 names are mostly Palestinian nationals, with 2 listed as Irish dependents and 1 Morocco woman. About 200 British nationals are believed to be in Gaza. It is not immediately clear if the Rafah border crossing will be opened on Friday. At the time of recording this is on a Friday, so that may update by the time you guys watch this. But some foreign nationals and injured Palestinian people begin to be allowed to leave Gaza through the crossing into Egypt for the first time on Wednesday. Yeah, on Wednesday, they did allow, some people were finally allowed to cross over. A small number of British nationals have already left in the initial batches of hundreds of foreign citizens leaving Gaza this week. Border crossings in and out of Gaza have been closed since 7th October, when Hamas, which is a proscribed terrorist organisation in the UK, attacked Israel, killing more than 1,400 people and taking more than 240 hostages. Since then, the Israeli military has launched a massive bombing campaign on Gaza, placing the strip under complete siege, and recently launched a ground assault in the north of Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza said more than 9,000 people have been killed. Speaking on Friday, Security Minister Tom Tugendhat said the British government was being very cautious about giving the exact number of people who will be able to get out because we neither control the border nor do we control what's going on inside Gaza. So what we don't want to do is give false hope or false belief to individuals that they'll be able to cross today, he told BBC Breakfast. I think that's the right thing to say. As much as I hate to admit it, Tom Tugendhat is right in that point of view, because they are very limited to no control of the British government in this situation. They really don't. Mr. Tugendhat said there were a list of people who have been approved to cross out of Gaza as soon as possible, as agreed by the Egyptians and the Israeli governments. In terms of British nationals, he said the list had been validated by the UK government to include British citizens or dependent or entitled people. The UK has deployed a border force team in Cairo, as well as consular officials in the Arish near Rafah to provide support for UK nationals after leaving Gaza. Surgeon Abdel Hamed, who lives in Liverpool, was among those who were able to exit via the Rafah crossing Egypt on Thursday, his family have said. Downing Street previously confirmed that 2 UK aid workers were among those that made it through Rafah, which is the only Gazan border crossing not controlled by Israel. On Thursday, the Foreign Office said more British nationals had managed to pass through the Gaza-Egypt border, but did not confirm how many. The UK government has given both the Israel and Egyptian authorities a list of British citizens and their dependents prioritised by their medical vulnerabilities. Dr. Ahmed Abu Faal, who is based in Birmingham, has told the BBC that 16 members of his family who are trying to leave Gaza are on the list, including 8 children. He said he has mixed feelings about the news because 2 young children and their mothers, his sister-in-law, will not be able to leave as their names are not on the list. Dr. Abu Faal told BBC Breakfast on Friday that the family did not know why they had been excluded. He said they had been given assurances from the Foreign Office. I feel absolutely sorry for him that they are that he has some family members excluded from it. Let's just hope that that more people are able to get out safely and not being accused of being part of Hamas or anything like that. Hopefully, the British government can continue to try and push for more individuals to get out as soon as possible. Obviously, we want all civilians to be safe in this conflict, those who are innocent and have no bearing in this conflict whatsoever. But yeah, let's hope those British nationals can get out of there. That is for sure. And I'd say the same to those to any other nations as well, guys. So it's a difficult tightrope for the British government on this one, regardless of how you feel about them. It's a very difficult situation for them because they have very limited control, very limited power of what they can do. So let's just keep our fingers crossed, that is for sure, guys. So we're going to be going from Conservative to Labour, guys. So I think the next 2 articles are both with regards to Labour. This one here, this is from the Independent, guys. So this is an interesting one to say the least. I have not read this at all. I just read the headline. I thought this was an interesting one. So 1 in 4 people say Labour's private school tax raid is being introduced out of jealousy. More than half support the policy, which experts say will raise 1.6 billion, funding the party's plans to invest in the state sector. So, 1 in 4 people are basically claiming, according to Labour, saying this is out of jealousy. Where's the jealousy in this? I'm curious to know where the jealousy comes from. Excuse me. So, 1/4 of adults think Labour's plans to lump taxes on private schools is being driven by jealousy, a poll has found. What was that the only option on the poll? I'm just kind of curious on that one. I'm just kind of straight away. I'm just thinking, like I said about polls. I've said earlier, polls taken with a pinch of salt. But despite the finding, more than half support the policy, which experts say will raise 1.6 billion, funding the party's plans to invest in the state sector. The Keir Starmer's party will impose a 20% VAT on private schools in England in the first year in power if it wins the next election. Currently, they benefit from an 80% discount on business rates, and they also do not have to pay VAT on school fees. The increase could be passed on to parents, with somebody paying £15,000 a year currently having to find an additional £3,000. And an Ipsos poll of more than 2,000 people found a quarter felt the policy had been drawn up to push parents who send their kids to private schools. But 57% of adults support the policy, with a majority of Conservative voters opposed, but most Labour supporters in favour, the Telegraph had reported. Private school leaders have condemned the policy, warning that the VAT charge will mean school fees will have to be increased, and it could lead to the closure of some smaller schools, with parents unable to afford the cost and instead sending their child to state school. I don't like this. People saying it's a bad thing that their child is going to be ended up going to a state school instead of a private school. Well, would we not want a better state school anyway? Because that's kind of how I see it. Like, if you really want, like, I don't want. Like, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes as a parent, and as a parent, because I'm not a parent, but trying to put myself in the shoes of one and thinking, what is a fair amount of money that parents should be paying for private education, and are we giving too much benefits to private education? And I think we are. I still think that this is a good policy by Labour. The point there when you're saying about oh no, I'm gonna have to send my child to state school, and I'm just thinking to myself, there are so many ways that you can educate and train your children nowadays that doesn't involve having to take them to state school. Like, I'm right here. The power of the internet can do wonders for you. There are plenty of initiatives and ways that you can educate your children by not just having to be at state school, but just by being in front of a screen can make a world of difference now. The day and age of just in state schools, I believe that you can educate your child just by having them talking to someone on the computer screen to them, like a teacher, and that. And it could be tending to be much more cheaper than having to send them to a private school these days. But that's just kind of my gut feeling on it. But maybe you guys in the comments will know better. Independent School Bus Association Chief Executive David Woodgate said schools will be doing everything they can to plan for Labour's tax on children's education. Without policy detail, it is difficult for them to do so fully, and impossible to know the full implications of their budgets. They have also hinted at plans to look at loopholes to avoid the charge. Helen Pike, master at the Magdalene College School in Oxford, said there is no impact assessment on this policy, it's a headline. She told The Independent, I have a big problem with that because it is a regurgitance tax. This is going to hit the people who can afford it least the hardest. The majority of schools don't have the capacity to absorb the increase. The Institute for Physical Studies said the policy is likely to have a limited effect on the number of pupils attending fee-paying schools. I still think that if you can help improve the state schools, public schools, then that needs to be more prioritised than private education. I'm sorry if you think this policy is unfair, but this is Labour's plan of raising money to be able to put back into public state schools, and they need more and I'm sorry, but they need priority over your private education. We have to think about the vast majority here, the middle and low income of parents who have children where they barely have any money themselves. Their education is being eroded away by not having a sufficient educational system, and that needs to change. It needs to change, and if you don't like it, tough. I'm sorry. If you want to take your child abroad, take your child abroad. But in my opinion, if this is going to harm private education, I'm sorry, but you guys are thinking about the rich and the wealthy. I'm thinking about the middle and low income children of the future who need a better education. And and that they need to take precedence because you guys have the money in your pocket. So that's my position on that. Guys, I've got two more two more news articles to look at. If you can, hit the like button, it'd be greatly appreciated. If you can, share across social media, and if you hit that bell notification icon, you'll be notified when I go live. So let's go into the next one, guys. The next one here is from OpenDemocracy. This is to do with the COVID inquiry. Hold on a second. I'm just going to make sure. Right, I just want to make sure I almost had the wrong one there. So the headline is lack of female perspective has had significant impact on COVID policy. The decision on COVID measures did not properly consider domestic abuse, PPE, childcare or pregnancy, the inquiry was told. This is something that's I know it's a few days old, guys, but I've had obviously done a few videos, and we had a great deal of talk about this on Wednesday's The Snowflake Show with myself, Lee Korn, and AllShorts. Definitely check out AllShorts if you haven't checked out his channel as well. And we had a lot of discussion and watched videos about the COVID inquiry and the state that is in. But this one is more about the lack of a female point of view, and it's very important that you have a diverse group of people when it comes to whatever situation you're in to get a different perspective. And not having a lack of female perspective means the mindsets are more narrow rather than more open when it comes to something as in a crisis that this is. The government's pandemic policies on domestic abuse, childcare, PPE and pregnancy were hampered by a lack of female perspective, a former top civil servant had said. The UK's COVID inquiry has already heard that Boris Johnson oscillating and indecisiveness saw vital decisions delayed at key moments. Now, the former Deputy Cabinet Secretary Helen McNamara had claimed that other issues were overlooked or misunderstood because of a lack of diversity at the heart of government. According to the evidence she submitted to the inquiry, it was far too difficult to get people to pay attention to domestic violence, and senior figures felt it was not an urgent problem because it was not showing up in the data. Just because it's not showing up in the data doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that's very important to put in perspective when talking about these things. You don't want to think that awful things happen to children and partners and parents in their own home, she told Inquiry Counsel Andrew O'Connor. If you are a more experienced civil servant, you have a different sense. Unfortunately, of these things, I think it goes to who is involved in advising decision making. We were looking at harm through a very narrow lens without realising that, of course, there can be all sorts of other consequences, things you can't see. The inquiry had already heard about the issues with PPE provided for NHS workers from ethnic minorities, and today, that was a few days ago, emails submitted in evidence showed that problems around the PPE designed specifically for women who were also known about in government. But as late as April the 15th, McNamara felt compelled to ask whether anything was being done about the fact that most PPE isn't designed for female bodies, despite 77% of staff being female. How did that happen? Like, are we not taking, like... Hello? It's just ridiculous. In her witness statement, McNamara also said when it came to policies, the exclusion of a female perspective led to significant negative consequences, including the lack of thought given to childcare in the context of school closures. Yeah, that was another thing as well. You know, it was kind of like, let's just talk briefly about the impact obviously it had on children. Like, education was really damaged by these kids being stuck at home. There was a real lack of it, especially if you were a child and you didn't have, especially if you were a parent that didn't have access to the internet. It was very rare. I mean, the vast majority do, but like having to have a computer or whatever and making sure your children is getting the education they need through the computer and all that, doing all that, teachers and teachers and whatnot having to work that as well at homes and whatnot, that must have been an absolute goddamn headache for them, that is for sure. She referred the narrow perspective of some government figures and how they underestimate the challenges likely to be faced by some families coping with school closures. Yeah, because obviously instead of them going to work, because they're going to work and obviously having to look after their children, she said it wasn't enough thinking about the overall experience of children who might not have quite the same privileges as the people who are in the room at Whitehall taking decisions. Another thing as well is that some people, obviously, there were some jobs that obviously people cannot basically stay at home for. So and every company had to kind of take their own initiative about it, whether they were essential or non-essential businesses during that time as well, during the lockdowns. McAnar's witness statement added, there was a serious lack of thinking about domestic abuse and the vulnerability about carers in informal networks of how people look after each other in families and communities. There was not enough thinking about the impact on single parents and some of the restrictions. There was a disproportionate amount of attention given to the more male pursuits in terms of the impact of restrictions, and then learning the lessons of the same: football, hunting, shooting and fishing. There was a lack of guidance for women who might be pregnant or were pregnant from what those who were key workers should do. And she added the restrictions around birth and pregnancy care seemed unnecessarily restricted and were comprehensively slow to adapt. I never understood this, although I appreciate the need to keep hospitals as secure as possible. I'm sure there would have been kinder ways of managing pregnancy and birth, especially given the difficult differential ethnical outcomes for women and babies who became stressed. The inquiry is now 16 days into its second module, which focuses on the government's response to the early stages of the pandemic. Yeah, we know that already. Yeah, I mean, the impact obviously on pregnancies and that as well, that wasn't, the pain that women had to go through during that time. I do apologise for yawning. But it's just, yeah, it's extremely stressful. Where's their faults in all of this as well? I think, we're missing a point there. It's not good at all, guys. It really isn't. If you hear some noise in the background, I do apologise just in advance. Yesterday, Johnson's former communications director, Lee Kane, raised similar concerns about the lack of diversity at the heart of government. Commenting on the government's hugely unpopular decision not to offer free school meals to children during the school holiday, he said, I remember asking in the cabinet room of 20 people how many people had received free school meals. Nobody had, resulting in a policy and political blind spot. This was a huge blunder. The PM, to some degree, understandably, said we need to draw a line in the sand on public spending commitments. But this was clearly not the place to draw that line. I said to him at the time, you don't think Hungry Children is a place to start? Just from, a moral and political standpoint? Like, hello, feeding children. Like, are we not going to feed kids? Like, yeah, I don't think that's going to be very good for your polls if you're not going to feed children, Prime Minister. McAnar also pointed to discussions about whether to ban fans from football fans. I was thinking of the wrong thing there. Apologies. Whether to ban fans from football matches early in the pandemic, saying nobody who was involved in that discussion had probably ever been to a football game in quite the way that most people go to football games. She told the inquiry that Downing Street had a toxic culture in the early days of the pandemic, which hindered the official response to the virus. Yeah, we know this already. Yesterday, the inquiry was reading messages in which Nakamura was described as a CT by Dominic Cummings, former advisor to Boris Johnson. Something that was horrible to read, but was both surprising and not surprising. Macho overconfidence was pointed to as an issue in government decision making, and this was echoed later by David Harpenden, former chief executive at Whitehall Behavioural Insight Team. He said there was a sense that we were lucky to have the best team, and no doubt they were extremely talented, brilliant people, but can also bring a lacuna of overconfidence and particularly maybe less openness to other aspects. The inquiry continues. OpenDemocracy is fundraising to pay reporters to cover each day of the public hearing. So yeah, guys, just before I just come on the comment, I'll remind you guys to, if you can, they have a YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description of Open Democracy has. If you can support, you can subscribe to them there. Also, if you can, donate any money to support Open Democracy and the work they've done, because they have been on top of the COVID inquiry extremely well, with clips from YouTube as well as reporting it, as well as reporting it. So just wanted to put that in there. But the main gist of what I wanted to talk about was obviously the lack of the female's perspective in this, and it's quite damning to say the least that they just, like, typical white men are all the ones who think they know what's right and everything, that know what's right for them. Apologies, my phone just went off there. Okay. To think they know what's right and all that kind of stuff, like, yeah, like I said at the start of this topic, guys, diversity and different perspectives, different retrospective point of views helps, either gives us a better understanding, a better way of challenging the difficulties that face us. And obviously this government was in absolute chaos, and their handling of everything was quite embarrassing when we had the worst possible prime minister at the worst possible time as well. And we also had a power grabbing man in Dominic Cummings, who was trying to hold influence over everyone and everything. He's influence over Boris Johnson and trying to get a grip and take control of situations. A guy didn't even apologise for his actions, at least not to my knowledge anyway. But I just feel sorry that so many women and children were their difficulties and what they were going through were not being taken into account as well during the pandemic, and I think that's a really important point to point out. I mean, people were pointing out obviously the ethnic backgrounds who are suffering suffered more at the hands of COVID. Like, where's their point of view in all of this, in this inquiry? I think that's a very good point to point out as well. So guys, I've got one more story for you guys. This one is from Byline Times, and this is to do with more healthcare issues, shall we say. So the headline is, "What lies behind the shocking rise of serious injuries in social and healthcare?" Andrew Kermsey examines why new figures obtained by Byline Times shows there have been a surge of injuries inside care settings. This is interesting. Why has there been a surge inside care settings? This is indeed a worrying thought, that is for sure. As Byline Times revealed, the number of patients experiencing serious injury while in care has skyrocketed by thousands in the last 5 years. But what is behind the rise, and what is happening, and if we leave things, and what happens if we leave things as they are? It is possible that, as the CQC suggests to me, that the figures could be outliers, or that part of a rise may be explained by the increased number of people in health or social care settings in any given year. But the sheer size of the 30% rise, far outstripping the rise in number of people accessing social care, for example, meant that those we spoke to argued it was unlikely to be an incidental rise. There's probably a cultural aspect to this. Why does it have to be around culture? Said Chris Thomas, the head of the Commissions of Health and Prosperity at the Institute of Public Policy Research think tank. We know that in the NHS and care homes is a really hard sector to whistleblow, in the level of protection and the fear of repercussions that make it very challenging to see where things are going wrong. That's part of it, Thomas goes on, but I think that misses probably the key point. But this is a system that is just running absolutely hot on the very top of possible capacity after a lot of resources cut and effective drives over the last 10 years. Austerity. Do not forget, we had austerity for a long time. Yeah, this is a government that cut a lot of things, guys. And we have suffered as a result of that. It's important to remember that. Before Brexit, before the COVID-19 pandemic, before war in Ukraine, these austerity measures were in place, were being done. It's worth acknowledging that the rise in patient injury is only one in several ways in which the NHS and social care are feeling the strain now. NHS delays have helped cause higher than normal levels of death in the UK since the COVID pandemic was at its height. While as of August this year, there were 7.7 million patients awaiting the treatment in England. That's the number there, what they're calculating roughly. At the core of that is staffing, facing burnout, stress and low pay. Factors have all led to recent unprecedented strikes among doctors and nurses. Huge numbers of experienced medical staff are quitting the profession as of June 2023. There was 125,000 vacancies in secondary school in England. 125,000, leaving the UK with one of the lowest number of doctors per 100,000 inhabitants of the entire OECD. You've got more stretched staff and a more inexperienced staff, as Thomas explained it. I just think overwhelmingly you just can't expect to get to a point where patient safety is generally ensured if you're not meeting the core standards of safe staffing. Yeah, how can you apply patient safety if there's not the capacity there? When is that gonna snap? Those problems are only added to in social care, as Dan Willings, a senior fellow at the health care research charity the King's Fund, puts it. There are lots of jobs that people could do, probably paid better than working in social care, and probably have better prospects and allow better quality of life. Yeah, see, this is the other thing as well, is that although there's a lot of people in the National Healthcare Service that love working for the National Healthcare Service because it does great wonders, the pay is poor, and the incentives to go private or work abroad, the pay and the benefits of them are much higher for the employee. So to them, for better quality of life, better income and all that kind of stuff, the incentives is there for them to go private rather than be public and being in the National Healthcare Service. So you can't blame people for leaving the NHS to go private when it means it gives them, if it's a benefit to them. The idea is we want to switch it back the other way around. We want to give incentives for people to be a part of the NHS. There needs to be incentives, and not just in terms of pay, but the benefits that come with being part of the National Healthcare Service. Keeping what we have, but also building on it. The average wage for a care home worker was £9.66 an hour as of 2022, with low pay and high working pressure driving an exodus of staff that has meant there is now 165,000 vacancies across the social care sector. London alone now has a shortage of 28,000 social care staff, a vacancy rate of 12.6%. Wow. And again, you got to incentivize people. Now, I understand some people are probably going to say, but there's not the workers there. You're right, there isn't the workers there. There is that problem, which is why we need to, I've spoken about this before, guys. In order to build up the workforce in the UK, you need to build up training programs and initiatives and incentives for people to sign up to get into these programs, to make them want to work for our National Healthcare Service. While that is being done, because this is a 10-15 year thing, this is not something that's going to be done in a couple of months or a few years. Talk about 5, 10, 15, 20 years, like a good span of time, getting them into the NHS, right? While that is taking place, you recruit from abroad, from the European Union or from the world, whatever is the cheapest consultant rates that you can possibly get. And yes, we do need to reduce the barriers with the EU anyway, but that's another topic. But yeah, there's workers right there across the pond who are healthcare workers in the European Union that we can bring in, that can help us keep the NHS afloat and help us get the numbers down, of course. And we want them to help pass on their knowledge of healthcare and that onto growing, training young national healthcare workers, of doctors, nurses, etc., to help us continue to build up the infrastructure that we need and help us build us a strong staff force. And I think that's the best incentive, the best way to approach it. Thanks to cuts to the council budgets that fund social care by the current government, spending per adult on social care in England fell by 6.5% between 2011 and 2018. And it's also worth bearing in mind that the two systems play into each other. Cuts to social care will often see hospitals and GPs picking up the slack where care homes or other social cares aren't, often taking beds and filling appointments that can't be spent. Again, like I said with the social care, you need to do the same thing. Social care needs to go hand in hand with the NHS. It can't just be one without the other. You have to take both into this. If you want to protect the NHS, you need to protect social care. These two are absolutely inextricably linked, says Wellings. The government's recent NHS long-term workforce plan may go some way to addressing the issue, with its promise to train 2,000 more GPs a year and 24,000 more nurses and midwives a year, and double the number of medical school places by 2031. But it's not without flaws. Thomas says he worries that the scheme could end up as a leaky bucket that doesn't really work if it's not properly funded to address the long-term retention of the staff it recruits. Exactly, and I've just spoken about that. This is about ensuring that the health and care system has the right funding and the right staffing. It has the right commitment in place to make it work, says Wellens. None of these is inevitable. Wellens went on to highlight the fact that the UK's health and care system was radically improved in the late 90s and 2000s under the last Labour government, after record investment that brought the UK in line with other European countries and cut waiting lists, increased beds, and saw patient mortality drop and satisfaction increase. But there is a real barrier to that kind of change. First and foremost, in one interviewee that puts it the cold hand of the Treasury. It's a point that has been made before, but the kind of sustained long-term funding settlement need to address the health and social care issues is something that is seen as an antiga to the Treasury, which critics say focuses extensively on the short-term returns from government investments. And in the meantime, the slow decline of healthcare in the UK is starting to sink in with the public. Last year, public satisfaction with the NHS hit a record low of 29%. Over half of the 70% who said they were satisfied with the NHS back in 2010. A massive change. That gap there from 29% to 70%, that is because of the government's austerity cuts. And people will turn around and say, what's happened to my NHS? Well, what do you think has happened? We've had one political party in power for 13 years. What do you think it happened? Read the damn room. It's not the NHS, it's the government. It's the political party that's been in power for 13 goddamn years. And if you can't read that, that's your fault. To state the obvious, we can't continue like this. It's not sustainable. We'll slide towards a two-tier system where those who can will go elsewhere, explained Welling. And we know from what the public tell us that it isn't what we want. People don't want a different model. They just don't want the one. They just want the one they have got to work. And it can work. And we can make it work. And it should work. Guys, it can be fixed. There has to be reform. There's no question about that. The National Healthcare Service and social care do need reforms. There's no question about that. And yes, of course, there is the issue of privatisation, hands deep well within the system. There's no getting around that. I do think we could untangle some of it. I do hope that the Labour government does untangle some of that privatisation into state hands. How they do that, I don't know. But there needs to be that there needs to be those conversations. Those in Labour members, they need to push that incentive, push that conversation in to untangle the private contractors, private hands. And no, nobody wants a two-tier system. God forbid that we want a two-tier healthcare system. We want a national healthcare service that is for all, not just for one set of people. And people should not have to pay out of pocket to pay for healthcare, guys, because that is what the Conservative government wants. That is what these the private healthcare companies who've got a hand in the NHS, that is what they want. To them, it's about money. In order for you to be healthy, you've got to pay out of your own pocket. When the National Healthcare Service is about being there for everyone, not for everyone, not for me, for you, for everyone. That's what it's supposed to be. And we need it to stay that way, guys. And on that, guys, We have reached the end of Regan's news round. What did you guys think of all 7 stories, guys? We covered a variety of different topics today happening in the United Kingdom. Let me know what you guys think, not just here in the Premier chat, but in the proper chat down below, what you guys thought of some of the stories. I'm interested to hear your perspective, that is for sure. Like, share and subscribe as always. Thank you very much for watching if you watched all the way, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.